Hi everybody. So in lesson 10, it's basically a continuation of what we did last lesson where we practiced completing the square. I'm going to throw in one little extra twist this time, but after that, we should be masters at completing the square, and we'll practice it again even in the next lesson. So this opening exercise here asks us to complete the square to write an equivalent expression. So if you're great at completing the square already or just did lesson 9, pause the video and try these on your own. If not, I'm going to walk through the steps again. So for this first trinomial here, I want to write it as a square. So we look at those first two terms and we make a square. We've got x squared, and then remember, we take our middleman and cut him in half, 3x and 3x. So my square has sides of x plus 3 and x plus 3. Then we complete the square physically. We physically finish the square. 3 times 3 is 9. So 9's the magic number I want to add in. 9's the magic number I stick in there, plus 9. But I can't just add 9, so I'm going to put parentheses around that. I also have to subtract 9. And then we can't lose that plus 1 that was originally there. So I took this original trinomial here, and I stuck in a plus 9 as well as a minus 9. Then we factor this expression and combine the numbers on the outside. That's how you complete the square. Sliding on over here. So my middle number is odd. That's okay. That means there's just going to be decimals involved. If I want to complete the square, I cut it in half. Negative 2.5. So x and x, negative 2.5, negative 2.5. The product of 2.5 and 2.5 is 6.25. Use a calculator there to deal with the decimals. Use the calculator to deal with the decimals there. So that's the magic number that I need to add on in right here. So we have x squared minus 5x plus 6.25. Close the parentheses. Well, I added 6.25, so I'm going to have to subtract 6.25 plus 8. X minus 2.5 squared plus 1.75. That's my same exact trinomial, just in a different form. It looks different, but it's really the same thing. So the key thing on this lesson is what we're doing here. Our leading coefficient's not 1. And it's really hard to make a square when your leading coefficient's not 1. How do I make a square? X times x. That's x squared. By putting a 2 in front of it, one of the sides would have to be 2x and the other side would be x. So here's what we do. This is the new step. If your leading coefficient's not 1, you factor it out from these two terms here. So watch what I'm doing. I'm undistributing a 2 from the first two terms. I'm leaving that plus 3 alone. Remember, that constant term really doesn't matter in the process. It just comes along for the ride. And then we forget that everything else existed, and we focus on that inside piece and complete the square. So pause the video and forget that 2's there. Just draw me the box for x squared plus 8x. Once you're done drawing the box, turn the video back on. X squared. Cut the middleman in half, 4x, 4x. That gives me a magic number of 16. But watch what happens here. We have to be careful. I have 2 parentheses, x squared plus 8x, and then 16 was the magic number I needed to add. But look, I really just did not add a 16 right there. That's not really a 16 that I just wrote, because the distributive property, that's really a 32. So when you counteract it, notice this. I'm not putting a minus 16. I put a minus 32. Why did I put a minus 32? It looks like I wrote 16 here, and I did write 16, but it's not really a 16. It's really a 2 times 16. It's really I added 32. So you have to be extremely careful when you do that counteracting step right there. You have to watch out for that counteracting there if you have a leading coefficient. So now to finish it up, I factor. We factor what we created here. x plus 4 squared. That's right from the box again, x plus 4, x plus 4. And combine the outside, minus 29. That's how we complete the square if we have a leading coefficient other than 1. So complete the square on the following expressions here. I'm going to do these two for you, walk you through them, step by step. So I say, okay, there's a 5 out there. So we look at the first two guys and we undistribute that 5. Because I can only complete the square with a plain old x squared. I undistributed a 5 from those first two terms. And now I'm going to create a box. X squared, cut the middleman in half. That gives me a magic number of, let's go to purple, gives me a magic number of 4. 2 times 2 is 4. So let's stick in a 4 into this expression. Let's stick a 4 into this expression. 5 times x squared plus 4x. The magic number in the box was 4. But this is where we have to be careful. It looks like I wrote a 4, but it's not really a 4. It's really a 5 times 4. It's really a 20. So on the outside, how do I counteract a 20? A negative 20. And then what number was floating around out there? A 23. So notice that counteracting step gets a little bit trickier when there's a leading coefficient. And the final step is to factor. 5 times, look at the side of your box, x plus 2 squared. It's a 23. My fault, 23 minus 20 is a positive 3. That's an equivalent expression. It looks different, but it has the same value. So I have a negative x squared minus 12x minus 33. So it looks like it's good to go, but it has that negative there. So from these first two, I'm going to undistribute a factor of negative 1 to make it a plain old x squared. And you got to be careful here. I'm undistributing a negative, so that becomes actually a positive 12x. And again, I don't care about the constant term. He's just going to hang out over there. And then we complete the square on the inside. I forgot to draw my box. I'm going to start again. And I erase all that there. Didn't give myself enough room. Give you a second to catch up. Here we go. I'm going to make my box. X squared, cut it in half, cut it in half. I like this more than factoring because I don't need to think to make the box. 6 times 6 is 36. So 36 is the magic number I need to stick in to complete the square. I'm going to add 36 inside that set of parentheses. But be careful, we'll break out the galaxy pen here. What number is that really? It's not really a 36, it's really a negative 36. How do I counteract a negative 36? Well, I add 36. And that looks really weird, but I'm really making 0 there again. It looks like I wrote plus 36, and I did. But there's a negative 1 making it in this term here really a negative 36. And then I added another 36 on. And then the negative 33 comes along for the ride. So my final answer is negative 1, x plus 6 squared plus 3, once you combine those guys on the outside. So the next page of this lesson is kind of just practice problems. At this point, you can pause the video. I'm going to talk through 2 more, and then the rest of the answers will just be online in OneNote. So I'm not going to spend the whole time doing this entire lesson here because it's kind of unnecessary. We're just completing the square with a leading coefficient. So I'll do 2 more problems, and then we'll stop the video and I'll let you guys practice. So for this one here, remember we take out our GCF. We take out, well, not even the GCF. We take out the leading coefficient. X squared minus 4x plus 14. Then we make our box. X squared negative 2x negative 2x. X times x minus 2 minus 2. My magic number is 4. So that's the number I need to stick in. 6 parentheses, x squared minus 4x plus 4. Well, I decided to add in that 4, so I have to counteract that somehow. But that's not even a 4. That's really a, break out the Galaxy pen, that's really a 6 times 4. It's really a 24. So on the outside, I'm actually going to do minus 24. I'm actually going to do a minus 24 there to counteract that addition. And then the 14 comes along for the ride. So my final answer, 6 parentheses x minus 2 squared, that came from the box, minus 10. That's how I complete the square. Last one of this video. Notice it's not plain old x squared, so I've got a little bit more work to do. I've got to take out that leading coefficient. So from these first two terms, I'm going to take out a negative 2. Be careful taking out a negative 2. That becomes x squared. What times negative 2 is positive 4? Divided by negative 2, that gives me negative 2x there. So be careful in that step. X squared, negative 1x, cut it in half, right? I cut that term in half. X minus 1 minus 1. How do I complete the square? I complete the square with a 1. So that's the number that I'm going to stick into that set of parentheses there. X squared minus 2x plus 1. But that's not really a 1. That's really a negative 2 when you distribute. How do I undo a negative 2? I undo a negative 2 by adding 2, which leaves me with a final answer of negative 2 parentheses x minus 1 squared plus 9. So at this point in the lesson, I'm going to stop recording. Maybe you try the next two. The rest of them are kind of challenge problems. The rest of this lesson I would call challenge problems if you want to really get good at completing the square because you're a nerd like me and like completing the square. Otherwise, try these next two, and then you can move on to the homework. I'll see you in the next lesson, which is our last video of completing the square.